All right. Well, good afternoon, y'all. I am so glad you are here, and I'm so glad that those of you watching this recording after the fact are tuning in to look at these presentations and to hear a discussion about some of the wonderful work that our educational leadership doctoral students are producing for our institutions and our region. So for those of you I don't know, my name is Yancey Gully. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am a faculty member in the Higher Education Student Affairs program here at Western Carolina University. I had the pleasure of also teaching some courses in the Ed Leadership program, and have had the pleasure of teaching both of the students who are going to be sharing their work here with us today. And I'm super excited that they are here to share. So we have a couple of folks who are going to share the research projects as part of their work toward their doctoral studies. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves and tell you the title of their projects real quick, as well as any of our other guests who are in the room kind of introduce themselves. And then we will go from there. So I will just go ahead and turn to our speakers. And Myra, would you like to introduce yourself, please, in your project?
Sure. My name is Myra Watson, and I'm actually employed at Western Carolina University in the birth to kindergarten education program. And the title of my project is Out of Sight, Not Out of Mind, a lack of transition supports for students entering fully online programs at Western Carolina University. And I've said that enough times now, I didn't even have to look at it. So I feel pretty proud of that.
Yeah, at this point, it better sink in, right, Myra?
It just rolls off the tongue.
And so, John, please introduce yourself and your project title too.
Sure. My name's John Kasperzak. I work full-time at the law school at UNC Chapel Hill, where I work as the assistant dean for student development, and I teach a couple of classes as an adjunct there as well. The title of my project is Enhancing Mental Health and Self-Care Through Student Mindfulness Training.
Great, John. Thanks for being here and for sharing with us. Kim Dean Winter, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Kim Winter. I'm the Dean of the College of Education and Allied Professions. So I'm always very interested in the things that our educational leadership students are doing. I don't believe we've met, John, but I've heard lots of really wonderful things about you from Myra. And I just so happen to also be the chair of Myra's committee. So I'm connected to her work in that way.
Great. Thank you for being here, Dean Winter. And Joy, do you want to introduce yourself to our folks?
Hi, everyone. I'm Joy Bowers Campbell. I'm the outsider, it seems like, today, but I'm the Associate Dean for the Graduate School here at Western Carolina University. So, but I also used to have an EDD program at my prior institution that we just started. And so I left before I got to see the graduates defend their final pieces. So I'm looking forward to living a little bit vicariously through y'all and listening to your defenses and thinking, oh yeah, my guys are probably about at this stage too, where I left them. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say.
Great. Thank you, Joy. And you are not an outsider. You're a valued member of the educational community that is Western Carolina University. So I know that the presentations for today, they're kind of 5 to 6 minutes, and they have been out there on our share drive for people to look at and consume. Again, for those of you who are watching this recording later, you can get to those recordings from these folks about their presentations. And we really just want to have a conversation around their projects. But I do think we have enough time to give them 2, 3, 4 minutes to kind of encapsulate what they did to get us started in this dialogue today. And so I've prepped them that I'm going to ask them to do that as we call it, the elevator speech, right? They're really rehearsed. You've got 2 minutes in an elevator. How do you tell someone who knows nothing about your work how you've been spending your life for the past year or so in your research journey? So I'll pull it over to Myra to ask for her elevator pitch here for what she's been working on and what she's produced.
Sure. So it's really hard. In my defense, I think it was a hard like 25 minutes of hitting the high spots. So these will be the super high spots. But primarily the project was about transfer students who are coming into fully online programs at Western and how there's a real lack of transition and orientation supports for those students to help them build a sense of community, to help them build self-efficacy and connections to both their program, to each other, and to the university. So what I did for my improvement initiative was just in the BK program, which is where I teach. That's a fully online program, and more than 90% of our students transfer in from community colleges. So it's kind of my target population. The population at the university level, also of those transfer students coming in, there are a lot of underrepresented groups and groups that are at high risk for academic issues, things like being Black or African American, we have higher rates of students who are Latinx, we have higher rates of students who receive Pell Grants, higher rates of students that are first generation college students, all things that either put them in a group that is underrepresented in higher ed, or like I said, at higher risk for issues with academics or with retention and persistence. So looking at those, it's an issue of equity, an issue of social justice, and then just a real persistent issue in our program that I wanted to address to make sure that students who are entering online programs are receiving targeted, equitable, comparable supports to those students who are entering residential programs. So the improvement initiative that I had was to start a Facebook group for first semester students to come in. We did things that help them build social capital, which are things like you can do it, supports, connectedness to each other, learning about the institution itself, as well as specific targeted connectedness activities. So that might be asking them in some way to connect to another student, connecting them to me as a faculty member, connections to the program, or connections to the university. So there were informational things that were posted, how to register, how to connect with your advisor, where things might be, how do you contact financial aid, a lot of those kinds of things, as well as, hey, we're halfway through the semester, how's everybody doing? So those kinds of things were in there. Really what we found as a result of the Facebook posts and the Facebook interaction was that students really started posting on their own in a category that I called student initiated posts. Those became the posts that were most frequent and most engaged with. And so really the Facebook group opened that line of communication up. We saw good ratings on the pre and post test in relation to connectedness, that from the beginning of the semester to the end, their sense of connectedness to each other and to the institution increased across time. I also did semi-structured interviews with a couple of the participants, and those were really kind of a gold mine. They talked about a lot of things that were directly relevant to the study, but also other things just about their experience orienting to Western, transitioning from community college, that were just really valuable and helped, I think, the findings of the study be deeper and more meaningful. And the Facebook group is just one small thing. There are lots of other things that I have ideas about, and some things that have actually already started happening in concert with other people in the College of Ed and at the institutional level that are exciting. So Facebook group was kind of one small piece in a puzzle, but it was a piece that did move the needle on connectedness. And so I felt really happy about that. Do you want questions, or Yancy, I won't take your facilitator job. I'll stop. I'll say, okay, that was it in a capsule and move back.
Thank you so much, Myra. I appreciate that. The one clarifying question I have right now is for, you used the term that this was looking at transfer students coming from community colleges into the BK program. Just in case any of our folks watching this later don't know what BK is, tell us about that program.
Oh, I'm sorry. So that's birth to kindergarten education program. So it's a fully online teacher preparation program.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. And now we'll come back to you. I've got a number of questions for you, but I want to be able to do these questions in conversation in concert with our other presenter today. So John, can you give us again kind of the synopsis, your elevator pitch about what your project has been working with?
Sure. Essentially what it comes down to is there's a lot of information out there and about lawyers and law students being at times particularly unhappy. So, and that manifests itself with depression, anxiety, substance abuse, things like that. There's not really been a ton done to really pinpoint what it is that causes that unhappiness, although it seems to begin in law school and then never quite get back to a baseline of pre-law school happiness or, satisfaction. And we don't really know if that's as a result of the type of folks that are attracted to law school, or if it's because of the nature of the study or the nature of the job. But I thought there's not much that I can do in my role to change how the study of law happens, at least in the short term. There's not much I can do to improve students' lives once they get out. But I thought it might be helpful to see if we could develop some skills for them to maybe maintain, for them to be able to manage their positive outlook. So, and build skills in mindfulness and self-compassion. So that's what we did with a small group at the law school.
Thank you so much, John. And what's a quick kind of clarification for you as well. There was a specific version of mindfulness kind of training, or maybe training is the right word. You can correct my language here. That you utilized. Can you talk about that for just a second?
Yeah, we decided to use a Koru mindfulness program, which is designed for kind of emerging adults. So, younger folks. And it's meant to kind of fit within a college or graduate student schedule a little bit more than maybe a more expanded or a more comprehensive mindfulness program that you'll find out there for people who are, have more time or deeper into their careers. So it was 4 weekly sessions of 75 minutes with a textbook that went along with it, and an app that helped track the students' progress and kind of provided them an ability to connect with their moderator. With their facilitator.
Great, thank you. And that model, right, is, I think I remember from looking at your work, came out of some research at Duke, right? So another
yeah, unfortunately, I have to give credit to Duke. The folks in the CAPS program, the Counseling and Psychological Services program at office at Duke, developed the Koru mindfulness program, and have since you'll see that it's been adopted by many universities kind of all over the country.
Maybe even some of those at the lighter blue.
Maybe one day.
So these really were, I really enjoyed looking into your projects, and I appreciate you all kind of giving us a quick synopsis here. Before joining the session today, and since y'all been talking, kind of jotted down some questions, but one of the things I think might be really useful is now to pan back out a little bit about some of the language you all used, so I want to contextualize the work you did. So Myra, you talked about kind of your improvement initiative, right? And John, you were talking about the problem you were trying to solve. So I think one of the things that some of our viewers might be interested in is that this program, the Educational Leadership Doctoral Program that you all are in, is a special program in terms of the way it works pedagogically with the Carnegie classification of improvement science and working towards a problem of practice for your disquisition, your culminating kind of experience. So I'm wondering if the two of you could talk to us and share just kind of what that model is for people, because I don't know that everyone who watches this or engages with this material will know. And I think it's a really wonderful and unique way to make change in the educational environment. So would either of you be willing to jump in and kind of share the model, share what do you mean by improvement initiative? What is a problem of practice? How do you decide this scope, and what's the point of the idea anyway? I'll tell you, like my old French teacher in high school, you could be un volontaire or un victime. So we'll see which comes first.
I'll let Myra jump in to start, since she's defended and I haven't, and then I'll chime in on some other ideas.
Okay, sure. You can fill in my gaps. That'll be good. So the program, the EDD program at WCU, does have a focus on the use of improvement science in addressing an issue. And so something that we were asked to identify fairly early in the program is to think about a problem of practice. And so that's a problem that's in our local context. And that's something different than, maybe a traditional doctoral program, a PhD program or something, where you might be addressing a problem, but it may not be a problem for you or for your context. And what we do in this program is really seek to inform change and hopefully positive change in our environment, so in our job. So something that we were asked to do is really reflect on something that could be a problem, and then we went deeper to make sure, is it actually a problem? How do we know it's a problem? What are the systems that impact this problem and cause it to be what it is? How have we gotten to this place? And so there are a variety of tools that we used that are tools of improvement science, things like fishbone diagrams, driver diagrams, what if analyses, SWOT analyses, all these different tools where you're really looking at a problem in as holistic a way as you can, and really thinking about it at a systems level.
And I think the other thing, kind of piggyback on what Myra was saying, it's also thinking like through those tools, like Fishbone and others, thinking about where, even though there may be multiple different pieces that are affecting the outcomes, you really need to think about where your pressure point is and where you can have an influence to make a change, and then to kind of measure that change quickly to see if there is an impact, because you don't want to spend a whole year thinking about, or 2 years thinking about if there was a change, and to see if your change worked, because if it didn't, you may want to try something else and import something else into the system.
Great, thank you all. Yeah, well, some of the things I hear you saying and some of the things I know about this model is that it is really about finding out what your locus of control is, right? Like, what do you have in your sphere that you see every day might need to be improved? Then trying to say, let's try to figure out what might work. And of course, you look at the literature, you look at what other folks have done around the world to maybe solve similar problems. And then you say, well, will that work in this context? Again, going back, in my locus of control, will this work here? And then let's test something. Let's try an initiative to make an improvement. Then let's study if that worked or not. Let's tweak it. Let's try again. So really a cyclical model of improvement design, right? Improve, test, improve, test, improve, test. And so that we kind of get this, hopefully, into our everyday practice, right? Within our locus of control. So this doesn't become something we simply do for our disquisition, although that's really necessary, right? But then it becomes a practice, not just for ourselves as individuals, but for our offices, our programs, in the areas in which we serve institutionally. And so I think it's a really powerful model. And what I think here is that you all have the ability to impact really quickly change, right? And I know that the program here is really focused on justice, equity, inclusion, diversity, those kind of pieces. So really thinking about how this work can impact those bigger initiatives of the educational system. So Myra, I have a couple of questions for you, and John, I've got a couple for you, and I want this to be a conversation, so I'll offer to our other guests here, if you want to jump in at any point, please do, or if y'all want to ask questions of each other, you can certainly do that. But Myra, let me start with you. One of the things I wondered when watching your presentation is you were talking about, again, community college transfer students, right, who come into the BK, the Birth to Kindergarten fully online program, and kind of trying to figure out that one of the things that they lacked was a little bit of support in that transition process, right? And so I wondered, are there any of those supports already in place that what you were doing was adding to, or was what you kind of implemented here the first of these? Because I'm thinking of things like I've been in institutions where even transfer students had to take a first-year seminar course or a transition seminar course like USI or something like that. Other places I've worked don't do that. Some programs have versions of that if you're a transfer. Some have mentoring programs. So I'm curious about contextually, again, what were you giving an add-on, or were you giving an initial kind of run at a solution here, and how that fit into the other pieces that were happening?
Yeah, and so my project was focused only in the BK program, because that is like my most immediate local context and where I had some control, but I think it's similar across the university. So students who are transferring in, all transfers are not the same. If you're transferring into a residential program, there are different kinds of supports that are provided. Students who are transferring into fully online programs receive very minimal supports at the institutional level. There are some things, they're all asynchronous. It's how to check your email. Here's some stuff about Blackboard, the binge drinking thing and the sexual assault thing on campus for students who likely will not set foot on campus. So things that really lack relevancy for a lot of the students. So at the institutional level, there's a real gap in the supports there. So a lot of things have been left to the program. So I can't speak for other fully online programs, but for BK, I feel like for a long time, because we do have big numbers, we have rolling admission. So we're admitting students every semester, spring, fall, and summer. We have really been working hard to make sure that students were able to be academically successful. And so there were some pretty good supports that have been developed. Again, they were asynchronous. We call it the BK online support site, but there were several modules about, professionalism, academic success, how to navigate coursework, how to, do specific things in Blackboard, little practice assignments and that kind of thing. So the supports that were being provided were largely focused on academic success. And so that's, one piece of what they need to be successful, but we were missing this whole social connectedness piece that the literature also really talks about that they need to be successful and to be retained and persist to degree completion. So in that way, this was really a first step. The things that had been done before were maybe individual email communications and communication with advisors, but our program is really large, over 300 students with only like an advisor and a half who are working with all those students. So that's an issue, of not really having the dedicated personnel to be able to give students the level of support that's needed. So this Facebook group was an attempt to build community, have some support from the institution, but also with other students. So that was a long answer to your question, but supports were being provided, but not this specific kind of support.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Myra. I appreciate that. And I'm actually going to switch to John real quick for a second, because one of the things I found when looking at your work, John, is that you also noted that there were some academic stuff that was happening with your students, right? But that you didn't feel like you had the locus of control to work on the academic stuff as much, but you needed to work outside as well. Myra, you're noting that the supports that were there already were a lot of academic focused stuff, and you noticed there were other needs that would eventually impact, right, educational and academic outcomes. So John, talk to us about how you got away from the academic column to these other things that would then come back around and support that end goal as well.
Sure. So, I mean, I think the academic side, and like if you look back at kind of some of the seminal literature on this, students back 60 years ago, I think it was, we're talking about the stress and anxiety they had was caused from getting into a system and not understanding how the study of law actually worked, and like the Socratic method and how there's one exam at the end. Some of it was not just that there's one exam at the end, it's that the first semester grades are vitally important, because even though we say they're not all the time, they really are. It really sets you up for where you're going to go your first summer, which can then jump to your second summer. And if I wanted to make a change there, one, I'm not a faculty member, so I don't really have a vote in making any of those changes. And two, even if I was a faculty member and I had a vote, it would take years to make that sort of change of, let's study it, let's look at what other schools do, let's vote on something, let's try it for a little while. So I thought, okay, well, I can't control that. I know the students can't control that, but I know it's stressful to the students. And just because, like, the mantra I had was, you can't control the thing, but you can control your reaction to the thing. So that's where I chose to kind of focus my efforts and try to build up some skill sets in students so they could respond in a way that was maybe more helpful to them, as opposed to focusing on things they couldn't change.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And again, that ties here, right? Like what I'm hearing is that with both of you all, what I hear implicit here is something that I've heard from a lot of educational researchers in the past, is that, so many times those of us in graduate school take our students who come in and we complain that they don't write as well as they should, or they don't think as critically as we think they should already coming in. So we blame the undergraduate instruction. The undergraduate instruction blames maybe the community college if they're a transfer student. But either way, it gets down to the high school. And if high schools had only done a better job, then our jobs would be easier, and not just easier, but we could be more advanced in the work we're doing with our students. And it keeps going back down their line, right? And finally, it just says it's all the parents' fault. And at the end of the day, but the educational research tells us doing that, saying whose fault it was down the line, doesn't do any good, because we can only impact students when they're with us. And so where do we need to put our most energy, right? Do we need to put it in, Myra, what you're doing here with this, as these students transfer in, what can I do, right, with these students to help them transition better with their relationships, with their understanding of social supports as they come to the program, right? So like, what can I do today? John, same thing. What can we do to help them not change what they come in here with, but change how they react to their experiences, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the other piece from me in terms of skill development is it has an impact beyond the 3 years they're with us. Like, if I'm looking at anxiety and stress reduction, I want them to carry that out into practice, so they're happier where they are. And it's kind of like giving them a fish versus teaching them to fish. And that's kind of one of the ideas I had.
Yeah, that's interesting. Myra, do you think that having experienced this, that the students who came through your project will have things that they take on that will be skill impacts for later in life as well? Do you see this having some transferable stuff for these students?
I do. And I think particularly for our students who are first generation college students, helping them persist to degree completion is life-changing, you know, not only for them, but for their extended family, for their children, and for other people. And the other place is for BK especially. Again, there are other online programs, but just in birth to kindergarten, the typical early childhood teaching workforce in this nation, but in North Carolina especially, they're low paid. There's low respect. You know, teachers don't get a lot of respect. Preschool teachers get less. Daycare teachers get less. You know, so it's really helping them with self-efficacy, professionalizing the profession, helping them be able to understand how to advocate for themselves and build connections in their professional practice and with people in higher education that I think can have impacts that are good for teachers, but also ultimately really good for young children. Like if we can get the word out, then that blame that goes, you know, all the way back to parents, we can impact that. There are ways to deal with that. Just once we have people who can listen. And I think early childhood professionals can lead that work. They just have to know what they're doing and believe that they can. So I think it does have big impacts, especially in the area of self-efficacy for those students.
I have a question that may fit nicely in here, if that's okay. Okay, so Myra, this is about the attributes of your students and builds on this whole impact piece. And John, as we were talking, I think this could easily be spun and be a question for you too, because I think it could be applicable. So when you think about other attributes that you didn't spend a lot of time talking about, so for the BK population, Myra, that would be, there's something like 97% full-time employees while they're going through a program. It's very, very high. And while that's not that unusual for transfers, it's not the common for an undergraduate population, and certainly not in comparison to other teacher education majors. So I'm wondering if particular attributes like this one you think make these sort of supports that you're putting in place, synchronous supports, more impactful for them given those attributes.
I think so. I think that there are things that the program has done to address that particular attribute. One thing is if they're, you know, working in an approved location, so they if they're a teacher assistant in a public school or a teacher in a Head Start program, they can do their internship and their student teaching in that program so that they can continue to get paid during that time. So there are some real you know, financial, logistical kinds of things that have been done to support those students by the program that are not common to all BK programs in the state. So that's something that's unique to us. I think that because we have people who are employed full-time, many of them have been in childcare or some early childhood setting for 10 or 20 or some of them 30 years. And they're now coming back, you know, to get this degree. They have tons of practical experience, but they've just been online. They're working full time. They're taking 1, maybe 2 classes at a time. They could have been in our program for 6 or 7 years to complete what really should be a 2-year program, you know? So they're coming through, and it has occurred to me over the course of this project, the incredible amount of persistence that it must take to do that, especially when things are primarily asynchronous and they're not connected to other students or really deeply connected to faculty or those kind of things. And it's just an area where we needed to do better. And so I think that, you know, I speak for, like, John is a good friend of mine in this program, right? If I hadn't had John and a couple of others, you know, during this time in a hybrid program where I do have lots of supports and it's a graduate degree, and, you know, like I have a lot of kind of privilege in going through the experience I've had, but if I hadn't had people to help me, I don't know that I would this all the way through. So I think seeing that for myself and then transferring it to my students has been really powerful. And definitely see that that connection piece is hugely important, especially if it's taking longer and you're working full time and you're a mom or a dad or whatever going through. Just that sense of connectedness to a peer is really important.
Dean Winter, do you have any other question at this point?
No, thank you.
Yeah. Joy, you're unmuting.
Yeah, I was gonna, so first I just have to tell John that my heart is like through and through Carolina blue. But Myra, your research really falls in my wheelhouse as being someone who is coming from leading a fully online program for teachers. And the year that I took over, it was a literacy program. The year that I took it over is the year that the college decided it's going to go fully online. And so this was in Kentucky, people all over the state of Kentucky, but I faced the very same thing. I didn't have some of the same attributes of my students, and these were all working teachers, so they were getting a graduate degree. But and I think it's the struggle for the fully online programs that I see in my role as the associate dean at the graduate school. You know, we have at the graduate level quite a few programs that are fully online, and actually we're getting close now to 50% of the graduate students at Western Carolina University are in fully online programs. So, you know, the EDD is not considered a fully online program. Like you said, you have that hybrid thing. So I'm wondering, you know, from your kind of research and you're looking at that problem, and John, I think like Kim said, I think this can also go to yours. You came to the problem that you had with this locus of control, but I assume that you left this problem with some answers, but even more questions. You know, which is kind of how that cyclical process tends to be. So I'm wondering if both of you could talk about, you know, Myra, if you could talk about maybe some of the questions you left your project asking about fully online, you know, higher education programs. And John, the same with you. What kind of unanswered or keep you up at night questions do you still have, even after kind of, you know, seeing a little bit of daylight at the end of the tunnel with your questions? So hopefully that makes sense. I feel like I just was a long-winded way of saying, what do you still want to know?
Myra, do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I was thinking a lot about the question you asked prior to this. Didn't know you were going to ask it. So what I'm left wondering, it's not really about the intervention we did, and not really about the problem that we are trying to address. I'm really left wondering, what should our community's response be? So from my position at the law school is I'm a little bit like a first responder, where when a student is having a problem and a professor finds out about it, they send them to me, and I'm supposed to, like Dr. Gully was on a phone call with a student prior to this. I'm usually on the phone call with a student, or a Zoom or something like that. And we hear a lot, what are we doing to support mental health of students? What are we doing to support mental health of students? And there's some information out there about what the community's response should be, and what the faculty's, what should they do to help maybe not create the problem, or to help normalize the fact that it's okay to seek help. And where I was a little disappointed in kind of my recruitment efforts is I did not get a huge sense of support from other staff or from faculty in trying to get students enrolled in this program. And that leaves me wondering, is it something that they just think we've got a good handle on, and so they're just going to let us do the work? Or is it something where they say one thing, but are acting in a different way? And I think as much as I can say that it's important for students to practice, to have good mental health and to practice good things, to not kind of fall into bad habits, the value of a distinguished professor saying the same thing is a lot greater, because they see the students kind of hold them on a higher pedestal. So I'm left with wondering, what can we do as a community to make the faculty buy into these sorts of efforts?
Thanks. And that's like such a great way to how I should have said, what are you left wondering? I could have just succinctly said that whole thing. So Myra, tell us now for you, like, what are you left wondering?
So I think one of the big things that came out of this project for me was really getting to a place where we need more information about what students actually want and what they need. So a big focus in the beginning, and I still believe that what students get is not equitable. But what the research shows is that the supports do need to be targeted to the needs and desires of transfer students who are coming in. And that's a piece that we haven't really done either at the institutional level or even in the work that I did. There was some of that informative assessment piece, like the PDSA cycles that happened within the improvement initiative of, what information are you guys interested in? How can I help you? That kind of thing. Not really doing a quality needs assessment of what are the needs, what information do they need, what supports do they need, what do they want? There are lots of things going on residentially. For example, Dr. Lowell Davis is on my committee, and something that he mentioned after I defended was, we don't send the one book to transfer students and fully we should start doing that, so they can participate in the one book and the book discussion with everybody else. Well, yeah, that seems awesome. There's tons of stuff like that on campus that could be adapted for online students, could be targeted for them. But what really do they want? What do they need? What are they putting in? Why are they online? Are they online because they want more of kinds of hands-off, situation, just want to power through and get the degree? Are they online as a result of their situation? Are they place bound? Are they working full time? Do they need this to be able to complete the degree? So I think really I realized that some of what I did, while I think it was good quality stuff, it was stuff that came from the literature and stuff that came from my experience and opinion of what I thought they needed, or what I wanted them to have versus what they wanted and what they needed. So I think that would be the next step, is to really think about a needs assessment for that student population.
Awesome. Thank you.
I think that's really interesting, Myra. And John, you kind of get to this too, but how many times does a student sit in my office and come in with a problem or a dilemma, and I'm racking my brain to get them a solution instead of saying, what do you need from me right now? And what do you need from the institution? Like, it's so frequent that we don't ask students what they need because we assume they don't know or they wouldn't have come to us. Sometimes they need just to validate what they need, right? Or to help them locate it, not discover it. And so I think that's often a thing that we get in our own way because we don't ask the simple questions or do those simple assessments. And John, I think, when hearing you respond to Joy's question, I kept thinking something I tell my own students in the higher education student affairs program all the time. And, I was a student affairs administrator for 15 years before becoming over to the dark side of faculty life. And as much as I love student affairs and I teach that world now, the number one still statistically, the number one predictor of student success, however we define that institutionally, is relationship with the faculty member and not with an administrator or student affairs person. By the way, it breaks my students' hearts when I tell them that. And I have to remind them, it doesn't mean you don't do good work and we're not necessary. You are very needed, but still the primary predictor is that relationship with the faculty member, right? And so how do we help students make those relationships? And by the way, my whole dissertation was on the relationship between academic affairs and student affairs, because we like to say there's a tension there, and faculty don't want to support students individually, and they often do. And there's all this kind of misinformation around that.
I think an interesting question that comes out of what you said, though, is from the law school's perspective, it's kind of like a chicken or the egg problem, because is it that the students are successful because they develop a good relationship with their professors in the first year, or is it that the faculty in the second and third year tend to gravitate to the students who are successful, and they know they're successful because they're on the law review, they had a job at a big firm over the summer, they want to collaborate to work on things together. And that gets back to, a little bit of the equity issue that, that is kind of embedded within the program, where when you're thinking about, like I said before, some of the stress that is caused on some of these students is them not knowing and understanding how law school works. And the easy way for that to be solved before you come in for some students is because they have a mom or a dad or a brother or a sister or someone who's a lawyer, and they can lead the way. That's easy for them. But for a lot of students who are first generation, they don't have that. So they don't have someone to kind of guide them. So it's the problem perpetuates. And, and we're grappling with a lot of that at the law school now.
Makes total sense. I'm writing up some articles from a research study right now that I did on LGBTQ community college students. All the data would tell us they should not persist to graduation, that there are all these barriers. So I did a research project on LGBTQ students who did make it to graduation in community college settings, and what that was about. And I found really two paths. And it kind of actually, as I'm hearing you all talk, I keep thinking about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to think about this in context of this study. Either the students had really good faculty support, and that's what helped them succeed. There are two lines, that line, or they didn't find support based on their LGBTQ identity. And so the way they made it through was their activism in creating supports for the next generation, right? So there's this, Myra, for you, advocating, what do they need? They were telling institutions what they need and making it happen. That's what got them through. John, the faculty relationship that they had for whichever reason, right? Like you're talking about two different scenarios here, but that was the thing that made it happen. And I'm really now trying to figure out how one got on one path or the other. And again, for both of your studies, I'm just seeing my gears go about like, oh, think about this in relation to the data. Because I think it's probably a both and situation for a lot of these students in terms of how we support them to success and challenge them to success at the same time in appropriate balance.
I love that you just said both and, because I think that even goes back to what we were saying about academic affairs and student affairs and what John said about chicken and the egg. We spent so much time building culture and conversation about differences and barriers and conflict between the two, but it's a both and. There's no such thing. And the lines are super blurry when you really try to sit down and figure out what's what. You really can't pull them apart completely anymore. And so we could have a whole panel just on this issue. We need to all engage in some research together.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And same thing, I think, Maya, you're probably seeing it too with your folks, right? Like what I was a community college administrator for a long time too. Like getting students through community college takes a different skill set, right? Because it's a different student. And so what does that mean when they get to us? Their needs are going to be different. We're going to have to support them differently. And they might be better aware of what they need.
Yeah, and that, that's the interesting thing about 90% of our BK students coming from community college is that they come to us as community college students, right? And so part of the transition work that has to happen is the difference between a community college and a four-year institution, and really helping them navigate that, especially when more than half of them are first generation students and don't have, like John said, they don't have that lawyer, they don't have that parent or that family member who's been to college before them. To help get them through that. And there is a different level of support. And I think hand holding has kind of a negative connotation, but it's a term that came up a lot in the literature. There's a lot of hand holding at the community college level, and there's less of that once you get to a four-year institution, and really helping them be able to navigate that and advocate for themselves and have relationships that'll enable them to be successful.
Yeah, totally agree. I want to be cognizant we're about 5 minutes out. So I want to turn it to either of you, unless Dean Winter, do you have any other questions? Kind of a closing remark, kind of the thing you want people to know, Myra and John, that you didn't get to say based on the conversation we've had so far. If there's the one thing you want people to know or to consider from the work you've been doing.
So I think that the thing that has been biggest for me, and the thing that I would learn, and the thing I have learned and would tell people, is that sometimes when you see a problem, we went through this whole process, which was really valuable, and I think good things came out of it. But also things have continued to come out of it as we've gone along. There's some things in place now in the college. There's distance ambassador stuff. There's the conversation around the one book. There's, things that are happening to help address the needs of these fully online students. And while the research was an important part of it, how I really got those other things happening or the conversation started was just through conversation. So sometimes there are people out there who also see it's a problem, people who want to do good things. If you just know the question to ask and the people you need to talk to. So I think that kind of in a bigger level, like my project was about connectedness for students, connectedness for faculty and for professionals is also really important in helping get things accomplished. So, I think that was just really powerful. Like, things have happened because of conversations. It started with the research project. I've learned a lot, but also things happen with conversations. And so if you see a problem, it doesn't have to stay a problem. You can reach out to people and say, hey, let's work on this. Let's think about this. And don't rush it, but explore it with others. And, it's just been pretty powerful to me how things have happened that I think could really positively impact students. So that would be that was a long roundabout way to say it, but just reaching out and using your colleagues as assets and working together to solve the problems from lots of different disciplines. And that stuff has happened between me as a faculty member and people in student services, student support services at various levels, and administrators. So it is that both and. It takes everybody. Somebody's got to have the money, somebody's got to have the connection with the students, and somebody's got to have the processes to do it. And it takes all those people to get it together. So thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I often wonder and challenge folks to think about how many problems of the world have been solved by diverse people getting together for coffee and cocktails versus those same people getting together around a conference room table, right? John.
Yeah, I completely agree with Myra in terms of, figuring out who, like, getting together with colleagues, but also figuring out who your allies are, and also thinking about how they may see the same problem. I think the other thing that I've been thinking about, and not necessarily, more about the process than about the project or the research. And there's a saying I'm going to mess up, but it's something like, don't let perfect get in the way of good, or something along those lines. I'm not sure you could have picked a worse time to do some of the research and work we have done other than during a global pandemic. Well, I guess that's repetitive, than during a pandemic. But at the same time, every little bit helps. And I think there's a value in that. And even though the pandemic likely had an impact on students and likely had an impact on participation, there's something I can take from that, and there was a benefit to the students who participated. So there's never a perfect time to do anything. So just do it when it feels like you can.
I totally agree with you, but it is fascinating to me when we figured out how to continue our work and move on, right? And so now when we brought some of these things to the table, people who might have been saying, no, I don't think we can do that, it doesn't make sense, have realized, oh, yeah, why haven't we ever thought about that before? Because we figured out how to do things in a digital world. And it may not be our first choice for certain things, but we've obviously figured it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I totally agree. So as we wrap up, I want to thank you all so much for sharing your work, to being able to put yourself out there, and for doing the hard work of, kind of digging in where you work, right? Which is, I think, another level of difficulty sometimes, of getting in some muddy water to make a difference. And so I think it's fantastic that you all have done that. Myra, congratulations on finishing your project here. And John, we're going to watch you come across that finish line soon. And because we are talking about, at least for one of your projects of law school, and the other, Myra, kind of talking about, you mentioned earlier, I was chuckling that, our teachers don't make tons of money. We're not doing it for those financial reasons. My great grandfather, who I'm named for, founded the law school at Wake Forest University. There's an exhibit in the lobby of the law school there that our family didn't know about until about 3 years ago. And I went by, in his philosophy of instruction from kind of the 1890s, when he was dean there and founded the school, was this. And so I want to leave you with these thoughts: that making a good life is more important than making a good living. And so I think that for me, that's all that this educational work is about, is trying to help people make a good life. And that's what improvement science really, I think, is about as well, is helping our students do that on the day-to-day. So thank you all for being a part of making students have good lives. And so I appreciate it. If I can support y'all in any way further, let me know. Dean Winter, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And I hope to see you all virtually or in person soon.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Good luck.
Thank you. Everybody stay safe. Thanks.
You too.